So as you can imagine, I've been waiting for 3 years to preach on these texts. I'm super excited.
Yeah.
So just for those of you who are new here, I say this often, but as a reminder, we have a 3-year lectionary that I did not make, and I was not on this committee. And yet, here are the readings that we have. But you'll also know that I often say something else, that it's good for us to wrestle with the texts that we wouldn't choose. Because just because they're not our favorite readings doesn't mean that they're therefore somehow not in the Bible. The fact is, these texts are there. You saw the citations. You can look them up. They're there for us to wrestle with, and wrestle with them we will. We're going to start out with the Genesis text because I think it's good to get a little bit of context as we look at things. Now, most all of you will be aware that in the book of Genesis, we hear an account, a story, of the creation of all things. We actually hear 2 stories. They're right back to back, and they are different from one another. So chapter 1 is on the first day, on the second day, on the third day, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, right? Then, in chapter 2, we have the story of Adam and Eve. The way we know their names are Adam and Eve is because if you go to the Social Security office, that's where they are listed. That's not where they're listed. There are some things with the Hebrew that are important to look at. As Western Christians, most of us at least, we're accustomed to being in German or English. This may be less true for Finnish, so bear with me. But as we think of the Hebrew text, we're going back not 2,000 years, but much further, to an Eastern language with its cultural assumptions that are radically different than our cultural assumptions. And so when we simply translate the words into English, we often lose some of the nuance and understanding of the text itself. Now, one of the other things is, depending on how they chose to chop the reading for the day, we may miss other aspects of the story. So you'll notice that there is this person in the garden, but we don't know anything from today's account where this person comes from. But we all know the story, right? God creates the Garden of Eden. We get a little paragraph that kind of delineates it by rivers, Tigris, Euphrates, and 2 others. And we get this sense that all is well. And God looks and says, I need someone to care for this. Or the traditional language is to till and keep. To till and keep. So God needs a steward for this. Although steward sounds too much like 9 to 5, I sit at a desk, if the Wi-Fi's out, I don't come into work kind of job. This really would be better understood as a custodian. Someone who has custody of this and is somebody who is involved in this work with their hands, right? So the idea is that God says, I need a custodian for this new creation. And so what does God do? God gathers the dust, right? And shapes the dust into this custodian. The Hebrew word for dust is Adama. In Latin letters, we spell it A-D-A-M-A-H. And what is created is not a man, is not a woman, but is the Adam. The Adam is created, a thing of the earth, a thing of the ground. Or we might, although it loses completely the connection, say a human being is made. If we were to say that God created Adam, flannel shirts, plow, beard, this story becomes cruel right at the beginning because it's just Adam, right? By definition, more alone than could possibly be imagined. Instead, there is this custodian, the Adam, who is there. The Adam partners with God in creation by naming the creatures that come. There is a partnership in this. The Adam from the Adama. Now, as the story moves further, God discovers something about creation that God didn't anticipate. It is not good that the Adam is alone. That is the theme for today. It is not good that the Adam is alone. So this is where the naming comes. So there's this kind of comic relief section where God starts with like a cow and a squirrel. Surely we'll find something to work with the Adam so the Adam doesn't feel alone, right? Or those videos you see of a cat on a leash. A cat on a leash, it's not a thing. Maybe later it gets to dog and it's like, well, maybe we're getting somewhere. No. All throughout the story, it is the Adam, the Adam, the Adam. So now, as we move into this suddenly, God is saying it's not good that the Adam is alone. God decides to do something decisive to solve the scenario. Now, as I was thinking about this text, there were a lot of things that were rolling through my head. And one of them had to do with a movie that came out in 2008. The lead character in this movie was known by an acronym, the Waste Allocation Lift Loader, Earth Edition. The acronym is WALL-E. Some of you saw that Pixar film. In this movie, WALL-E, the voice is more male. Now, I'm not in the tech part of Silicon Valley, but I don't know how much energy is spent in robotics making gendered robots. I don't think that's too much of a thing. Certainly for a waste allocation lift loader, that probably wasn't a high priority. They needed different priorities. But one of the things you'll notice is that WALL-E's primary task is to clean up the Earth after we wrecked it all. The humans have left the planet, and the WALL-Es have been left behind to tidy it up until the humans can come back. It's interesting when we look at the book of Genesis, because if we go a little further in the story of the Adam, that the Adam is created to till and to keep, to work, to plow, and to protect. What's interesting when we think of that is the Hebrew word there for till or work is avodah. And the word avodah is used in other contexts as well. In fact, is a key word in Hebrew, modern and ancient, to describe worship. The fact that working the soil, doing God's work in creation, tilling and keeping, is in fact, in and of itself, worship of God. So we've got WALL-E doing his thing, right? Except it becomes very clear, mostly because of some great facial features in spite of being a robot, and of course appropriate music cues, that it is not good for the WALL-E to be alone, if I were to misquote Genesis, right? WALL-E is alone. Now, if we go back to Genesis, we know how the story goes in our heads, right? We've got lumberjack Adam, who goes to sleep. God takes some tiny little bone out of Adam, and out of this tiny thing makes Eve, right? First off, as a kid, maybe it's because my dad is a mechanical engineer, but I'm like, there's not enough material there. How would this work? But as we think of this text, the word rib is a little problematic. It's not wrongly translated, but it could very easily be translated to mean side. Side. So we go from Adam to Adam and Eve. No, we do not. We go from the Adam, who no longer exists in this story. The term Adam ends at this point in the story. God sunders, takes apart the Adam. And from the Adam, then, comes Ish and Isha, not completely unrelated to the English expressions of man and woman being related terms. Now, we've gone from 0 genders to 2. I think as we understand creation and as we learn more, there is Ken and Barbie is a little too limiting for our understanding of the universe. We need to recognize that underlying all of these relationships is this profound understanding that it is not good for the human to be alone. How many hard, painful, difficult stories do we read about in the news or know about in our families with people who are isolated from community, from important relationships, and they make bad choices because they are in pain and in alone? It's a common story because, as God tells us in Genesis, it is not good to be alone. Now, that in some ways is handling the easier text of the morning. The gospel text for today and Jesus' helpful admonition in regards to divorce and marriage, put over and against the context of Jesus' wider conversations, elevating women into an equal position with men, which had not been the case. One could argue about today as well. But this image of something about human beings being together when we know we exist in a broken state, that our relationships are not perfect. And in some cases, they are broken to the point where the road to health and wholeness is to separate and to move forward on different tracks. We understand that this sense of wholeness and building up of life reflected in so much of the Gospels because of our own hard-heartedness is something that is not possible to do, maybe in the way we imagined when we began in some relationships. In the weddings that I've done, I have not had two people sit in my office with the sense of, well, we'll see how long this goes. That's not really how things start. And yet, because of our brokenness, none of our relationships are perfect, and some are harmful. Now, as we look at the text, the Pharisees are hot to judge Jesus. They're there to test him. It's never a good account. They come in and they say, we know what'll trip him up. And they bring up this issue of divorce to trip him up. And one of the things that's interesting is the way this passage ends. Do you notice we get all this heavy language about divorce and relationships, and then Jesus suddenly goes, hey, look, a kid. It's like this very awkward ending to the text there. But when you think about it, there's a transition. There are a group of experts in the law of Moses who are seeking to cite chapter and verse to punish, to keep out, to trip up. And Jesus says, I'm not playing your game. You are looking to find all of the rules to punish and keep out and to somehow put yourself above when in fact we are all broken. What you need to know is that your relationship with God is not about legalism. It is about opening your heart to God like a child would. And the closer you are to that, you will know God's love in the world and how broad it is. At the end of the day, it is not good for the human to be alone. Now, we might think of that directly in regards to marriage, but gathering here at 10:45 on October the 3rd, we are not alone. We have gathered in this space. We gather socially and at work and in all kinds of ways because it is not good for the human to be alone. So anytime we nurture relationships, anytime we invite into community, anytime we open our hearts towards others in a way that Christ would do, we are doing God's work here and now. It is good to be together. Amen.